We should be good to go. It's all enabled. Oh, it saved it. I didn't even need to restart the stream. Okay, perfect. Alright. Am I on? Oh, alright, perfect. Alright, well, let me start this. That is in the wrong monitor. Why would you do that? Alright, so since I don't know how this works, I'm just gonna, I don't know how to PowerPoint, so we're just gonna do it. We're just gonna do it like this. Alright, so what is configuration management? It's simply modeling all your server configurations as code and treating them exactly as you would treat any other piece of code. So you keep them in version control. You run through pull requests. You run through change management with them. The same change management that you do with anything else, any of what the devs do, anything like that. You can do automated testing. You can do a bunch of crazy stuff. I don't do automated testing, but that's because I suck at, and yeah, that's hard. Automated testing is hard with configuration management, but it's doable. So what is Ansible? Well, Ansible is an agentless configuration management solution. It's easy to read the configs, it's easy to learn, and it uses SSH for Linux or WinRM for Windows. So before I get on to command line utilities, I'm going to show you guys how you set up an Ansible server. So it's pretty simple. There's only a few things you have to do. If you're on the Vagrant environment and you have Vagrant running and you got Vagrant running with Vagrant up, you're gonna do Vagrant SSH Ansible server, and if you want to follow along, that's where you're gonna go. But if not, just take note. If you're on CentOS, you're just gonna install Apple releases. Let's do that the right way. And feel free to like yell at me in chat if I'm going too fast, or anybody has any questions. Did you run Vagrant up? Are you in the folder? God damn it. Why, Scoopy? Why? So, so you install Apple release, that's pretty good. You, Python, Ansible is Python 2 right now, which is kind of but. So then you're going to install Python 2 pip. So this is all CentOS. This whole thing is on CentOS, so it's a little different if you're doing this on Ubuntu. And yes, the Ansible host machine does have to be Linux. It doesn't necessarily need to be a server, though, so this all applies on your desktop on anything else. And then once you have that, you just do pip install Ansible. Now, I recommend you use pip, right? The reason I'm not doing the package managed the reason I'm not grabbing the version of Ansible that is on any of the like repos, the CentOS repos, is because it's like 2 versions behind. So I do recommend you actually use pip to grab Ansible. And you can grab a specific version of Ansible by doing == and the version name, but I'm just going to grab the newest one. So if you want access to the most up-to-date production release of Ansible, you use pip. Or I guess you could download it from source, but I mean, it's easier to do it from pip. And then we're gonna grab SSH pass because we are going to be using SSH passwords. This is going to be saved. You are correct. It is saved. I'm going to export it to my YouTube channel and I will post it. So don't worry. So yeah, and once again, this is with CentOS. So it's yum. It's CentOS. That's how I'm doing it here. So SSH pass. If you don't have SSH pass installed, Ansible can't use SSH with password auth, which is what I'm going to be using for this. I'm not going to be using it with key auth, with pub key auth. And actually, I need to also do this. And I need to turn strict key host checking off, otherwise it's going to kill itself. Otherwise Ansible will go and break itself. Sometimes. You can also get rid of that in the Ansible config, but it's best to turn it off on everything, depending on what you're doing. And that is how you get the Ansible command line utils. And this is now it. What I just did is it. You now have a full-featured Ansible environment for a Linux environment. If you're going to use Windows, there's more that goes into that. I'm not going to cover it in here, but the documentation is very good. And if you got questions about it, I'll answer it after we're done with the main thing. So there are really two core command line utilities that come with Ansible, and one is Ansible, which is for the ad hoc commands. You can run the modules independently, stuff like that. And there's Ansible Playbook, which is actually for executing, well, not executing, but running the playbooks using the configs. And then there's another one that I like to throw in here, which is Ansible Vault, which lets you encrypt sensitive files. And you just do Ansible Vault encrypt the file name, you give it the password, and AES encrypts whatever the file is or whatever. And at work, what we do is we have wildcard certs, and those are all Ansible Vault encrypted with the department password. So with an Ansible Vault password. So when you go to deploy those, you have to enter Ansible Vault, but that allows us to have our secret things in configuration management. So we don't have to like SCP shit around. So everything is all in Git. Oh god. So the main Ansible concepts of at least Ansible playbooks are, well, let me rephrase. The main Ansible concepts are playbooks, which is something.yaml, and that contains plays inside of it. Plays contain tasks and roles that just do things. Roles are modular collections of tasks. Tasks execute a module, so like yum install these packages, yum remove these packages, command echo whatever, something like that. And handlers are tasks that run when the task they are attached to changes, and there will be examples of this. Now, the main Ansible directory, the way the Ansible directory structure works, is Ansible searches the current directory you're in for a roles directory, and if that's not found, it looks in etc Ansible roles. Inside each role, there can be multiple directories, tasks, files, templates, defaults, and handlers, and some of those require main.yaml. Tasks, for instance, is required for a role to do anything. If you make a role folder and it doesn't have a main.yaml file in it, it doesn't do anything. You could have a file named like do this thing.yaml, but it's not going to know what to do with it, so it looks for a main.yaml file. In tasks, it requires a main.yaml. In handlers, it requires a main.yaml. In defaults, it requires a main.yaml. And some of the others, well, files and templates, it definitely does not. So anything that Ansible looks in by default, which is handlers, tasks, and defaults, it needs a main.yaml file in there to know what to do with it. And we can look at a little directory here. See. Here you have a role, you have a folder or directory that's named the role, and then in here you have tasks, and then here you have main.yaml, which has a bunch of tasks. But don't worry about this. I'm gonna break this down more. But this is the basic structure, and then on the top level you have your playbooks. you have this, you have this, and this role, this is a roles thing, and it says run this role. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna go in here, I'm gonna go in here, I'm gonna go in here, and I'm gonna find this. I'm gonna run this. That's basically how Ansible looks stuff up for playbooks and roles. Well, that's how it looks it up for roles. And then there's variable precedence, and there are 16 or 17 levels of variable precedence, which I did not include all of them here because I just included the ones that I use frequently. If you Google Ansible variable precedence, there's a whole thing in their documentation about it, which is going to be better than what I do. But basically, if you put variables on the top level of precedence, they're going to overwrite variables that are named the same thing lower. So in order here are ones that I use frequently. You have extra vars, which is Ansible playbook command line. If you -- extra vars, you can enter variable names there, and that will override all of these. If there's something named the same, it will override them in the playbooks anywhere that they're referenced. There's you can write a play that prompts for variables, and that is higher than the play variables themselves. And you have the role defaults, which are pretty low. Pretty much everything will override a role default. And like I said, there's a lot more if you just Google Ansible variable precedence. There's 17 or 16 levels of variable precedence. All right, so let's break down a really simple playbook. And if you have any questions, you can definitely ask them because I ran through a lot. But you're going to see them when I run through the simple playbook. You're going to see what I mean. So the playbooks are pretty simple to read. I mean, I'm pretty sure you can look at this, and if you don't know YAML, you can pretty much read it and kind of get a feel for what's going on, and you don't really need to know YAML. Any example that you'll look at, it's really a subset of YAML that you need to know. Like, you have to be able to look at this and be like, yes, this is a list of things, and this is like a dictionary of things, because it has a key value here. So, this is a very simple playbook. So, up top here, you have a TAC name, and this would be a list of plays, and this playbook has one play, and this is a play definition right here. So this says the name of the play, which is example playbook. It should actually just say example play. Hosts all. Now host is required if you're using Ansible inventory, which I'm going to talk about more after this. But if you're using Ansible inventory, you can do stuff like hosts web servers. And then if you run that, this will run against all the web servers in your inventory, but we're not doing that. I'm going to feed in inventory from the command line. So we have hosts set to all, so this will run against everything that you give it. And become, that says become sudo, become super user. And here is one of the things I talked about. This is how you get variables into a playbook, or into a play. Vars prompts for variables. You can actually have Ansible prompt you for stuff. So it's asking you for the host name. You have another name thing here inside of the vars prompt dictionary. So this is important. You have indentation here, and indentation is important. So if you have a declaration like this, you need to make sure whatever is going in there is indented. So for vars prompt, it's a list of stuff it's supposed to prompt for, variables. So the name is what the variable is going to be called. This right here. This is what it's going to ask you for. This is what it's going to say, and private is set to no because I want to see what I'm typing. If it's a password, you can leave it blank, or you can just say yes, and that'll hide it if it's something that you don't want people to see. And vars, these are, you just write them here. This is a play level variable. And right here I'm saying file name is the string hello, and here you have a tasks definition. And inside the task, now tasks are what do all the work. This is a list of tasks to do. So in here you have a list. Two things. It's going to rename the host. So this is the name of whatever you're calling this. Rename host. You're using the hostname module. And you indent, and it doesn't have a lot of arguments. The one argument that it really has is name. And this is how you reference a variable. If it's by itself, you have to do quotes around it, but if there was like something in front of this, you don't need to do the quotes. So this is referencing the hostname variable that you gave it up here. And then it also creates a file with the file module at this path. And as you can see here, this does not have the quotes around it, but this file name variable references this file name variable. And then state touch, that's another argument. State touch just says create it. This could be state directory, and it would make a directory called that. It also has mode, and you can set like 077, whatever you want to do on that. So that's a real basic breakdown of how, that's a simple playbook breakdown. Now, if you're using a role is modular. So what you do for a role, what you would do for a role is, let's say, actually I have the example, so there's no point for me saying that. But this is great, and this is what a lot of people do in the beginning. They just have like base server.yaml, and they have the entire thing in this one playbook, and that's great. That works for a very basic level. But if you want to do it, well, if you want to do it properly where it doesn't get really annoying, because let's say you want to create a web server. Now you want to create Apache. You want to have an HTTP web server running. You want to have an Apache web server. So what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to copy this. You're gonna have to go to your other playbook. You're gonna have to copy your entire base config, paste it in there, and then just add on. And you don't want to do that. That's ridiculous. So you want to break your base configuration or whatever you're doing, and you want to break the whole thing into roles. So here you're going to notice the tasks is missing, and I have this roles declaration here. Now you can have tasks and you can have roles in the play. That's fine. But in this specific case, I got rid of the tasks. I referenced a role. I said, okay, you gotta get the same information, and you gotta run base config. Now base config, if you remember how Ansible looks up its roles, it goes to roles. It looks for the directory called the thing that you specified, and it runs them in order. So if you do base config, other config, it'll run them in order. So it looks in tasks, it looks in main.yaml. And in here I put some more stuff. I put some more stuff in here, but it's basically got the same thing, like the same two things. And this is literally just a list. A main.yaml inside of tasks, it's just a list of things. That's it. A list of tasks to run. So this renames the host. I also had to install Apple releases. Then I had to install Python 3.4 and Python 3.4-pip. And then I have it create the same file referencing the variable. And then I added this too, because Ansible can do some very basic if-else logic. It uses when. So when I say the host name is this, it will create a file called hostname matches /IT/hostname matches. So we can run this, and you'll see that it works. See here. So I'm in my Ansible host server right now. If I do this, you can see I got my playbooks here. And well, let's run the first one. Let's run our basic playbook. So we're going to do Ansible playbook, example playbook.yaml. Now, here's what I was talking about. We're not going to use the inventory, but I'll talk about the inventory later. We're going to pass the inventory using the -i from the command line. That's a comma delimited list of IPs, host names, whatever it can actually connect to. So this is one of the Vagrant boxes. This is server 1 we're going to be provisioning. And do -u is the user. You can also specify that in the playbook if you want, but I didn't. I'm passing it in from the command line. This isn't an argument, but it overrides stuff, and you can set it in a bunch of different places. And -k says prompt for the SSH password. And Vagrant in these boxes, the Vagrant user can passwordless sudo, so I don't need to have it ask me for the sudo password, but you can use capital K if you need to do that. And you don't need to prompt for a password if you have SSH pubkey auth set up, but I don't. And the password for the boxes is Vagrant. That's what it is. So this is server 1. This is interesting. Alright. I didn't know it was going to do that. I broke everything. Alright, so server 1. It gathers a bunch of facts, which you can reference, and I'm not really going to go into those, but you can use them in Ansible. You can use them. It references a bunch of variables which you have access to by default. Stuff like Ansible underscore hostname, Ansible underscore interface name, stuff like that, and you can dive into that. So as you see here, this is your basic output after you run a playbook. It gathers facts, says that's okay. I said rename host. It only Ansible modules should because I have had issues with some Ansible modules that were then fixed, but Ansible should be item potent, which means modules will only do something if it's not what you said. So if the host name was something else, it changed it. If the host name was already server 1, it wouldn't have changed it. And same thing here, this file doesn't exist, so if we run the same thing again, everything should come back okay. With the same host name, everything should come back as okay. That came back as changed. That's interesting. But that shouldn't have done that. That's my bad. I don't know why I did that. That's something wrong with it. And you should strive for your Ansible configs to always do this. You should strive to not actually... Your Ansible config should be completely item potent. So if you need to run like a shell command or a bash command in there, you should take pains to figure out what indicates that I need to do this. And then look for it using a module, and then use when to say like, hey, maybe you ls a directory or something, or you get the directory contents, and you have to run something that no Ansible module does, and you take the contents, you put it in a variable, and you do when this is in this, or when this is not in this, then run this. But you want to take great pains to make your Ansible modules, your Ansible configs item potent. So we ran this against server 1, so we can figure SSH server 1, and this should have the host name server 1, if I remember the IP address right. Yes, it does. So the host name is now server 1. And if we go to ls/etsy, what the hell did I say it make? I said let's make hello. There you go. It's there. That's like your most basic Ansible thing you can do right there. So now, if we run onto the one with the roles, which is a little bit more complicated, and the one with the role I did to also show off the kind of if-else logic here. File access and mod times. Ah, okay. Then it might have done that. Good catch. Good catch. Good catch. Okay, so what was I doing? I totally just blanked out right now. Yes. Okay. So I was going to run this against server. I was going to run the one with the role, the fancy role that only makes the hostname matches file if it's on server 3, or if what I tell it is server 3. But we're gonna, yeah, if what I tell it, it is provisioning a server 3. Why did I just move that over here? All right. So we're gonna run Ansible example playbooks. Or example roles. Yes. And we're gonna run this one on 4, which is server 2. Same user and -k. Okay, so what this is gonna do is I'll walk this through. This will change the host name to server 2 because I'm gonna name it server 2. This will install Apple release. This will install Python 3, Python 3 pip 3. It will create a file. It'll create that file that's called hello. It will make another file, but it will not. It will not make a file that says that is called hostname matches. So we'll call this one server 2. It'll go do its stuff. What SSH pass config? Oh no. If you you want to go to SSHD config and you want to set strict host key checking to no. No, sorry, SSH config /etc/SSH config and turn strict key host checking to no. Uncomment it and change it to no. On your Ansible host. And here you can see that it skipped it because it's like that's not right. So now here, if we see here, Python 3 is not installed here. It's not installed by CentOS on default. So if we do server 2, the host name's changed and Python 3 will be installed. Python 3.4.5. So now, if we run this on the one that is server 3, which is .5, or the one that I want to be server 3, it will evaluate this as true, and it will create a file called hostname matches m/etc. And also you can see in the readout that if you have multiple roles, it'll tell you during, like if you tell it to run through multiple roles, it will say like base config, and it'll say like, oh, Apache server when it switches over, so you can tell exactly where you are in the run. You can also, using the Ansible config file, you can also set Ansible to out, you could set the standard out to JSON if you wanted to run it, through like scripts that then report back to you, so you can ingest the information easier. So you can see here that it made the file. Because I told it was server 3. I gave the hostname variable, I set the hostname variable to server 3. And I was like, yep, and then it compared it, and I was like, yeah, this is what you want, this is what you wanted. Ho! Alright. /ls/etc. There you go, you got hostname matches right there. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't show off just like one thing with the Ansible. Well, if I didn't, I have to show off one Ansible ad hoc command. So I'm just gonna show off ping pong, but you can use like Ansible ad hoc to say like, oh shit, we need to like rip this user out of every server that exists or something like that, and if you need to do it quickly. Let's see if I don't use Ansible ad hoc commands actually that much. So let's see here. Let's do this across like all of them, or most of them. And I'm just gonna run the ping command, which just basically echoes pong back if it's able to get into them. You know, or it could, so -m is the module name, and I just want to ping, so it's -m ping. There you go. So you could do the -m user, and then you do, actually, I'll just do that real quick. -a for the arguments, and then, you know, name. What's a good package, guys? Shit. You know what we'll just make sure aux installed. Let's do that. Across these 3 hosts. Oh, okay, alright. Well, aux not the package name, but if aux was a package name, it would have tried to install it if it wasn't there on all of those. So no package matching awk found. Oh, alright. Fair enough. So that's Ansible ad hoc commands basically in a nutshell. That's how you run those. Okay, so we have this example roles here, and that's cool. We have it create all these files and stuff, and we have our base config. but what if we want a web server now? We know kind of how to do roles. We know how to kind of think about it. You know, I want to break things up into modular roles. Well, that's pretty easy. So you create a playbook, and we'll call this one web server. Webserver.yaml. That is a folder. I didn't want that. Go away. And we're just gonna yoink this. And there's a little copy pasting, and there's actually, honestly, people probably have better ways of structuring their stuff than I do, but this is typically how I structure stuff. We take the base config here, and we're gonna extend it with web server. And we're gonna go hit down into roles here, make a folder, and we're gonna call that web server, so it can actually run that. And it's gonna do all that same stuff. So we're gonna make the folder called tasks, and in tasks we're gonna have main.yaml. Now, I didn't get into includes or anything, and I'm not going to, but you can have, real brief, you can have another, you could have, like, something else.yaml down here, and then you could have an include in here that says include this, but the main.yaml has to exist so they can actually accept, so Ansible can parse the include to then use it. And we are going to, I keep hitting the wrong thing. We are going to have a templates folder also. And so we're in our main.yaml here for web server, and this is basically how you write your configs. You look here and you're like, alright, what do I need that isn't this for making a web server? And you're like, okay, well, we got these installed, which I don't need, but this is great. This is my base config. What do I need? Oh, well, I need Apache, and Apache on CentOS is called HTTPD. So module name is yum, indent, name HTTPD, state present. That is how you get, that's how we install HTTPD. That's how we install Apache on CentOS with Ansible. And then let's copy the index.html. Well, we'll do index.txt. And we'll use the copy module. Now, this is why roles are important. So, I'm sorry, we're going to use the template format, the template module. We're using the template module because we want to copy a file that is in the templates folder. And then I'm just going to message. So the variable and the templating system that Ansible uses also extends into files. So if you have files in the templates folder of the role, and then in template you don't, now in template you can do /etc/ wherever it is, but in a role, this is why roles are cool. In a role, I can just say for the source you're going to use index.txt as the template. Done, and it knows, okay, I'm in my role. I'm going to look in the roles template folder, and I'm going to look for that file. And then the dest is going to be /var/www/HTML/ and there's where that's going to go. And then we are going to start and enable Apache. Use the service. Name is HTTPD, state started, and enabled, yes. And now enabled means system control enable, if you're familiar at all with Linux. That's how you enable stuff on Linux. So it starts up a boot. And that should be everything we need to serve up index.txt, unless I forgot something, and this is going to be great, because I didn't really test this. So, yeah, yay me. And what was this? This was message, so we're going to set the message to be just, Ansible is cool. Let me just double check that's what we said in there. It is, okay. And you could also set message. You could set it on the command line. You could set it in the role defaults. And actually, you know what? I'm going to do that. Just to show how the... Actually, yes, that's what I'm going to do. Okay. So, in here, we can also make a defaults folder. And in the defaults folder, we have main.yaml. And we have, this says Ansible, so this message is going to, this version of message is going to say Ansible is cool. That's in the tasks default. And I am not going to set that in here. I'm just going to get rid of that. And then I will change it and I'll show you how the precedence kind of works. Okay, so the web server is going to be server 4. I'm just going to do that real quick. And web server.yaml. Phi okay, okay. And we're gonna, that is not the SSH password. Oh, I have a syntax error somewhere. Oh, it's actually in here. Okay. Whoops, we're main.yaml. So it can be a little touchy. YAML can be a little touchy with syntax errors, because the indentation does have to be correct. Oh, that's not, and that it just couldn't look up the name because I didn't name it that. All right, make sure you have a standardized naming convention. That would be good. I just didn't, the role was not named correctly. I had a web_server and I had web server up here. And you are server 4. Wait a second, that's not right. You are server 4. And once this is done, we should be able to, it should be able to say Ansible's cool. So basically what a role defaults allows you to do with variable precedence is it allows you to set sane defaults, sane variable defaults. So I'll give an example. Domain name. At work, I have our base server config has in its defaults, it has a variable called domain specified as the internal domain. However, I have a playbook that also, I have a playbook called base server DMZ, which is an external one, and in the playbook I overrode it with our external domain. That's an example right there that you can use. Okay, so there we go. I copied index.txt and HTTPD started, and firewall D is not on here, so we don't have to configure it. So now, if I curl curl that server 62.6/txt, it says Ansible's cool. Ah, look at that. So it templated the file with the variable name that was in Ansible. And there's more to template. There's a lot. It's called Jinja 2, and there's a lot to it. And honestly, I have never really seen much use outside of just variable. I'm sure there is, but I haven't ever had to use anything outside of simple variable, stick variables and configs for Jinja. Alright, so that works, that's cool. So what if we don't want to say that? Well, that's easy. Let's say this is a separate config, or actually, Let's make it a different web server. Well, let's not do that. I'll just use this as an example of variable precedence. And this will just say, what's up? And we'll run it again. And if we curl the web server, it's going to say, what's up? And of course, if we run this again, it won't change. This will not change because it's the same thing. So this is a good example of a higher level variable overriding the lower level role default, which was this. So we have both defined, but this one was higher level because it was in the play variable declaration. And that's the one that is actually there. Anybody got any questions about roles? Did you get how, does everybody get how we broke down, okay, I have a base config, I now want to make a web server, I'm going to make a web server role. And what you would also do is, I don't know, what do we got? If you host an application, you're like, okay, I have XYZ application server. You're gonna make a role called XYZ application server, and then you're gonna put your configs in there, and then you're gonna make a playbook, and then you're gonna have just layers. You're just gonna layer everything. That's basically the whole idea. Layer everything under modular configurations, layer everything with modular roles is basically what you're gonna do. All right. So it seems like everybody is still with me here. That's not what I was gonna do. What if you have an app that needs some input to run? Oh, what if you need an app that needs some input? So what do you mean by some input? Like oh, you mean you have an application that when it starts up it prompts you for something, like on a command line? Yeah, okay. Here, let me go to my favorite site here. My favorite site, devdocs.io, which is actually very good. And you can just you can enable certain documentation or whatever. So if you have something that you need to run that's going to prompt you, there is, I think it's called expect. There's an Ansible module called expect. Which you can actually say, here's the question it's going to ask, here's the responses I'm going to give you, and stuff like that. I don't use this that much, because honestly, I haven't run into that many applications that do that on Linux, like that many things that do that. And this is a Linux only module because this uses pexpect, and also you need to have the pexpect Python library installed. So before you run this, you need to make sure your Ansible config does a pip install on pexpect and make sure it's on the system before you would use this. But you can, yeah, I haven't used this that much. I haven't used this at all, but you can say command, and you can, it's kind of set up weirdly, but you can say, this is what I expect it to ask me, and this is what I expect you to respond. And, I mean, you can also do stuff like, what was I going to do here? You can also do stuff like, you can do this. You can totally do this. You can do stuff like this. You can, if you use the shell module, which you want to limit the use of shell and command as much as possible, but sometimes you are going to get in situations where there are no Ansible modules to do the thing that you want. And if you use the shell module, allows you to do stuff like pipes and stuff in it. So then, I can do stuff like echo yes into the command or something. If it asks you one thing, you can use echo, and then you can pass it. You can do all the command line tricks if there's a thing that is giving you trouble. You can do all that stuff that you want to do. There are ways around if you have some weird stuff like that. So, because we're getting a little bit, pretty much finished the whole planned portion. I'm just gonna talk a little bit. I do have some examples, which I'm actually gonna pull up that right now. I do have some examples of Windows modules, and I'll also talk about how Windows works with Ansible. I just need to actually pull it up. Okay. Right, so Ansible supports. This is my home lab stuff, and I just thought instead of me coming up with this, it would be better if I actually just had the working ones that I use currently up here. What am I even doing? Okay. So for Windows, it's a little rockier with WinRM. So with WinRM, you are going to need to have an SSL cert. You're going to need to have an SSL cert on the box that you're trying to provision if it's not on the domain. So when you're initially provisioning a box, you're going to have to make sure your template or your Pixie or whatever you're using to get it up to that state has a self-signed SSL cert on it. Actually, it could be signed, whatever you want to do. It has to have an SSL cert and it has to have WinRM listening on the HTTPS listener so it can WinRM in. Now, once you're on the domain, you don't need to do that. Once you're on the domain, Ansible can use the WinRM HTTP listener and it'll be encrypted. That's what it should be now, because there was an update for PyWinRM that they let that was a thing you can do now. And you need to do a couple more things for setting up a host on a domain. Like you need to set up Kerberos on the Linux host, and you do a bunch of that stuff. Well, that's actually you need to you need to join the Ansible host onto the domain, and you need to have a couple extra things installed, but the documentation's pretty good on it. They have a documentation on everything you got to do to set that up. And they have a script that will generate a self-signed WinRM cert on your boxes to get you started. You should not, for security reasons, you should obviously not keep a self-signed WinRM listener cert on your boxes in production. So once you get them into production, you should be replacing those with legitimately, properly signed either by an internal CA or an actual CA, like root CA or something like that. I would imagine you'd use an internal one, though, for that, because that'd be easier. But so I just wanted to show here real quick that the Linux stuff, the Windows stuff is actually pretty fleshed out. You got Win command. One thing that's nice that Ansible doesn't have is they don't have something as easy as Win reboot, and I don't know why for the Linux stuff, but with Windows you can literally just go Win reboot and it'll just sit there and wait until the Windows box comes back up. It uses Chocolatey. There's Win Chocolatey, so this is how you install stuff with packages. There's Win MSI. So there's also Win domain membership, and all the modules are in PowerShell for the Windows stuff. And now I said I was going to talk about inventory for just a little bit. I'm not going to show any inventory stuff, but there are two types of inventory. There's static inventory, which is like an INI file, and you if you see an INI file, it's just like this is your group, and your group is web servers, and then you have a list of your server names down here or whatever, and you can set variables for those in there too. Now, that is really cool if you're doing stuff like idempotent architecture for if you're doing stuff like immutable infrastructure, right? So if if your environment will allow you, because a lot of companies won't, and this is what we can't do the way we're set up, we can't do this either, but you could say, okay, you can only make changes via this file. So you go in there and you would type in a new host to this cluster, and you would run Ansible, and it would figure out, okay, there's a new host in here, I'm going to provision the host and do all this. So that's how you do that. Or if for some reason you just don't have any other thing. But Ansible can also use dynamic inventories, which is really, you write a script and it outputs some JSON back to Ansible, and it says these are the groups or whatever, so you can write your own. There's a lot that exists. There's stuff for Zabbix. We are going to use the one for Zabbix. So you set up your host groups in Zabbix, and it returns those as dynamic. It returns everything in Zabbix in the groups that they are in, so you can use them as Ansible inventory. I wrote one for Active Directory. There's ones for like AWS. There's ones for Azure. There's ones for all of that. A lot of those are included, or they're in the repo at least. So you just got to pull that down, change the Ansible config to point to that as its inventory. That's pretty much it. Unless there are any questions, that's pretty much a short introduction to Ansible, and I know that's a lot. But that was pretty much like a short, quick start into Ansible. I know I talk fast, so if you miss something, let me know. Yeah, it is a lot. The reason I rocketed through like the slides was because I think it's easier when you're looking at it. Oh, by the way, actually, a really good example. I'm staring at a really good example of a when right now, like when to use a when. Okay, so for instance, on there is no Ansible module for doing like for setting up like Windows NTP servers. So here, what I did was check NTP config. And now, obviously, if something's on the domain, it doesn't need to get this applied to it because it's going to be going to the primary domain controller for its NTP. But if this is the primary domain controller, it needs to be pointing to something. So right here, I'm doing, you know, if domain join is .low. So actually, back this up. This .lower is interesting because actually what this is Python. And you can do some really weird stuff in a when, because I'm pretty sure what they're doing is they're actually just evaling whatever you put in here as Python. So you can do like list comprehensions in here. You can do some weird stuff because you can write like completely valid Python in here and it'll run it. So you .lower to make sure nobody's like, I don't freak out if somebody accidentally put like capital Y. So if this is domain joined, if it's not domain joined, I'm sorry. Figure out what the time source is. Excuse me. Register time servers. And if it's... Oh, did I fucking break this? Oh, I broke this. Oh, man, I broke this. Alright, so ignore this. I was doing a thing where, like, I was checking what's in it. Basically, yes, if you're not on the domain, it said, alright, if you're not on the domain, it goes, actually set to the US NTP pool. And do that. I was doing a thing where I was looking for one of these, and then I did like a substring search, and it was really weird, and it was breaking all the time, so I got rid of it. But that's where you use a when. You use a when a lot when it's like, I can only do the thing via a command line tool, but I know specifically what needs to happen I know specifically what to look for, what to look for to see if I actually need to run it or not. So another example is realmd, doing a realmd join. Before you create realmd, before you run realmd, no sssd.conf exists on Linux. So if you run it, before you run it, you can check if that exists. Actually, the Linux command module, you can do a creates. There's a creates argument, and you can say creates this file. So I think for that one, that's what I ended up doing. You just say it creates this file, and then it checks if that file exists before it runs it. So there's a lot of stuff you can do. A lot of this is actually just like looking up the module that you want to use, and then what arguments are, because I can't tell you off the top of my head what a lot of the arguments are for the modules. You're always sitting there looking them up. I mean, that's pretty much it. So, thanks for stopping by. I will have this up on YouTube, and I guess I will post it on the Discord. So that is really a short intro to Ansible, a short, very rapid fire intro. And if you have any questions, be sure to ask me in the Discord, because I will help out. All right, thank you guys for stopping by. YouTube link. Oh, I mean, I don't have the YouTube. I'm gonna export it to YouTube, and that'll take like 10 minutes, and then I will link it in the Discord. I'm going to do that. Oh, you want my YouTube channel? Yes. I got you. Am I not signed on to that? I'm not signed on to that. I am not. Alright. Okay. I will post my YouTube in the Discord. I will post my YouTube in the Discord. So I will, you know, thank you guys for stopping by, and like I said, if you have any questions, just let me know. All right. See you guys.